So the last thing we're going to talk about as far as solutions go is what happens when you mix two aqueous solutions together. Well, sometimes you will form a precipitate. How will you know if you form a precipitate? Well, you're going to use the solubility table, which is on the back of your ion table. So let's take a look at this reaction between sodium chromate and copper nitrate. When that happens, you form a precipitation reaction and you get copper chromate and sodium nitrate. How do you know which one of those products is the precipitate? Well, first of all, let's start by balancing this thing. And when we start, we'll put a 2 in front of NaNO3 to balance the sodiums. And then everything after that, you'll notice we just have 1s. So which product is a precipitate? Which product is still soluble? Well, we're going to use our solubility table to help us figure it out. But first, let's look at the ions we have to look up on our solubility table. So we're going to break our products up into the ions that make them up. So that's copper 2 plus and CrO4 2 minus for copper chromate, and then Na plus and NO3 minus for sodium nitrate. So when we go to our solubility table, we can see the cations are listed on the left-hand side of the table, and the anions are listed across the top of the table. We just have to intersect our cations and anions and see what the symbol is in that box. So we start with copper, and then we look at chromate down the table and we see where they intersect. We see we have an I in the box where they intersect. I means insoluble, which means it will form a precipitate. So the solid that is formed in this reaction is copper 2 chromate. So just check now for sodium nitrate. You'll see when you check sodium and you go all the way across the sodium row, you'll notice sodium is always soluble. So if you have sodium ions in a compound, that substance is always going to be soluble. And then check out nitrate. If you go down the nitrate column, you'll notice nitrate ions are always soluble. So it's no doubt sodium nitrate is soluble. That's what the S means in the box. S stands for soluble. So when we go back to our reaction, we know that copper 2 chromate is the solid that forms the precipitate, and sodium nitrate is still aqueous or dissolved in solution. So let's take another one where the products are not given to you. So let's say we mix barium iodate and magnesium sulfate together. Well, what will the products be? And are any of those products soluble, or some of them going to precipitate? So to do this now, we first have to split our reactants up into ions. So barium iodate is Ba2 plus and IO3 minus. Magnesium sulfate is Mg2 plus and SO4 2 minus. To figure out what the products are, you're going to switch partners. The cation from barium iodate is going to match up with the anion for magnesium sulfate and vice versa. So we're going to get one possible product of barium ions and sulfate ions. The other product is going to contain magnesium ions and iodate ions. So let's look at the solubility table and see whether the combination of those two will form a precipitate or not. So we look up the barium ions and the sulfate ions, and we can see there's an I in the box, which means that product would be insoluble. It would form a precipitate. That's going to be the solid that forms when these are mixed. Just to double check, let's look for magnesium and iodate. So magnesium's row is right here. Then we go down the iodate column and we see there's an S in that box, which means magnesium iodate will be soluble. It will still be aqueous in solution. So when we go back to our question now, the formula of the precipitate, well, you're going to have Ba2 plus and SO4 2 minus. How would these ions form a neutral compound? Well, you'd need one of each of those ions to be a neutral compound. So the formula is BaSO4. So then let's consider the soluble substance, which was magnesium ions and iodate ions. What would the formula for that be? Well, to balance the positive 2 charge on the magnesium, you would need 2 iodate ions. So we need 1 magnesium ion, 2 iodate ions. So the formula would be MgIO3 2. And the names of these products would be barium sulfate and magnesium iodate. So now it is your turn to try one. What happens when we mix strontium chloride and ammonium carbonate? Switch the partners, use your solubility table, determine which product's going to be the precipitate and which one is still going to be dissolved in solution. Pause the video, try it out, and when you think you got it, press play. So you should have come up with strontium carbonate as your precipitate and ammonium chloride still dissolved in solution. Make sure to get help if you have questions on any of these problems that we just did.